Bible translations. We all have them. We all use them. But how consistent are these Bible translations to the original Hebrew text? Let's examine a few scriptures here that include the word heart. Here is Genesis 6 verse 5, Exodus 23 verse 9, Job 38 verse 36, Psalms 40 verse 8, and Jeremiah 9 verse 8. We've just looked at 5 verses that have the word heart in them. Now let's take a look at those and see what the Hebrew word is behind each of these and see if the translation is consistent. In Genesis 6:5, we have the word heart, and that's the Hebrew word lev, which does mean heart, but also it means the mind. In Hebrew thought, the heart is the seat of the mind. Exodus 23 verse 9, again we have the word heart, but this time it's the Hebrew word nephesh. And the word nephesh literally means the being or the person. Job 38:36, it's the word sakvi, and that means a covering. And then in Psalms 40 verse 8, again the word heart, but this time it's the Hebrew word me'ah. Me'ah is the guts or the bowels. Jeremiah 9:8, again the word heart, this time it's the Hebrew word karev, which means the inside. Each of these Hebrew words has a specific meaning which the translators chose to ignore and just translate all 5 of these Hebrew words in these 5 verses as heart. Because the Hebrew Bible is Hebraic in origin, it is written from a very Hebraic perspective. Our very own Greco-Roman culture is very different from this Hebrew culture, and we don't think in Hebraic terms. For this reason, the translators have removed the Hebraicness of the text and have converted it into one that is more in line with our Greco-Roman thought. While this may seem trivial, it does change the meaning the original author had intended. Now let's take a look at some verses that do contain the Hebrew word lev, and let's see if they translated that as heart, or did they translate it in different ways. Deuteronomy 4:11, here the Hebrew word lev, meaning heart, is translated as midst. In Genesis 31 verse 20, it's translated as unawares. In Exodus 9:21, it's translated as regarded. In Numbers 16 verse 28, here it's translated as mind. In Psalms 83 verse 5, it's translated as consent. Proverbs 19 verse 8, it's translated here as wisdom. Now let's take a look at Genesis 1 verse 1. In the beginning God created the heaven and the earth. Again, the King James translation. In Hebrew, Bereshit bara Elohim et ha-shemayim ve'et ha'aretz. The first word is the word reshit. And the King James, throughout the Tanakh, the Old Testament, has taken this Hebrew word reshit and translated it as beginning, chief, first fruit, much, principle, and time. The second word in Genesis 1 verse 1 is the word bara. And this word, this Hebrew word, has been translated as choose, create, cut, dispatch, do, fat, and make. Elohim has been translated throughout the Old Testament as angels, exceeding, judges, God, godly, gods, great, mighty. Shemayim is translated as air, astrologer, and heaven. Eretz is translated as common, country, earth, field, ground, land, nation, world. As you can see, the translators are not consistent in how they translate the Hebrew Bible. Let's take a look at a few other words from Genesis chapter 1. In verse 2, we have the Hebrew word ruach, but is translated throughout the Tanakh as air, anger, blast, breath, cool, courage, mind, quarters, side, spirit, spiritual, tempest, vein, and wind. In verse 14 we have the Hebrew word moed, which means appointed, and is translated as appointed, assembly, congregation, feast, season, set, solemn, solemnity, synagogue, and time. In verse 20 is the Hebrew word nephesh. This is the word that means being or person, and is translated as appetite, beast, body, breath, creature, dead, desire, ghost, heart, life, lust, man, mind, person, pleasure, self, soul, thing, and will. And lastly, verse 17 contains the Hebrew word natan, which means to give. And here is a list of how this word is translated throughout the Tanakh. Add, allow, apply, appoint, ascribe, assign, avenge, bestow, bring, cast, cause, charge, come, commit, consider, count, cry, deliver, direct, distribute, do, fasten, forth, frame, get, give, grant, hang, have, heal, heed, lay, leave, left, lend, let, lift, make, occupy, offer, ordain, over, oversight, pay, perform, place, plant, pour, present, print, pull, put, recompense, requite, restore, send, set, shoot, show, sing, sit, slander, strike, submit, suffer, take, thrust, tie, trade, turn, utter, weep, willingly, withdrew, would, yell, and yield. Have you ever heard the expression lost in translation? The different translations being published today are great for a casual reading of the Bible and is beneficial for learning the basics, but if one wants to dig deeper into the text, a more literal translation is necessary. When I first began studying the Bible seriously, I was looking for a reference that consistently translated the Hebrew text and was unable to find one. And this was one of the reasons why I decided to learn Hebrew, so that I could read the text for myself without having to rely on a translator's opinion of what the text is saying. I know this is not always an option for everyone, and this is why I have begun the mechanical translation project, which will bring the Hebrew text to the English reader.